listening to the Global Leadership Podcast, where we go behind the scenes and unpack the stories behind some of today's most effective and dynamic leaders. I'm Lori Herman, executive producer of the Global Leadership Summit and one of your hosts. This week, we'll be listening to an amazing conversation between my colleague, Jason Jaggard, and social psychologist, Dr. Heidi Grant. Dr. Grant is an expert on the science of leadership and was named by Thinkers 50 as one of the most influential global management thinkers. She's also a best-selling author, and you will want to check out her most recent release, Reinforcements: How to Get People to Help You. It was a great book. I'm not one who likes to ask for help, so I really learned a lot. In this conversation, you'll get to hear about how she got into studying the psychology of leadership and some tips on how she works through the grind of long projects, which is really interesting. We'll also hear what most leaders get wrong about growth and change. Before we dive in, I want to share with you an upcoming event, the Global Leadership Summit Special Edition. It's a half-day online event on Thursday, February 16th. I am super excited about this event and can't wait to experience it with my team. I always learn new things. The Global Leadership Summit team puts together people I've never seen or heard before, and I'm really excited and hope you guys will join us. You can get $20 off when you get your tickets by Tuesday, January 31st. There's more information on our website at globalleadership.org, and you can also check out our show notes. Just a reminder, it really helps us out whenever you subscribe and share. And now, here's Jason's conversation with Dr. Grant.
How did you, in your talk, which people will watch, you have this nice kind of mythology around, you know.
Oh, I got there.
Yeah. So but is that?
There's a running joke in psychology with researchers that all research is me-search, because psychologists in particular often either study something they themselves are kind of obsessed with, or something they're really bad at because they want to try to figure out, why am I so bad at this?
Yeah.
I had been such a strongly achievement-minded person, but I had seen even in my, before I kind of understood actually how achievement worked, I was always puzzled by the fact that I knew when I was in school, some of the kids that I knew to be so smart were so bad at it. I mean, they were just terrible. They would practically flunk out of classes. And I'm like, but wait, this is one of the smartest people I've ever met. Huh. Like, what's up with that, right? So even though I kind of thought, oh, I'm good at this because I'm smart, on some level I was like, that can't be all there is to it. Because there's a lot of smart kids that aren't doing well. What's that about? And so that's why I chose achievement and motivation, because I knew there was more to it. And so then you crack it open and you go, oh, wow. Most of the things I think are either flat out wrong or massively an oversimplification of the truth.
So so then, well, I love that, because it is like a Moneyball moment when you're like, there's all this unidentified intelligence, and we have all the wrong apparatuses to measure that. And so, and I have heard that like great research starts with an evocative question.
It does.
And so now, so then take us into the life of a researcher. I think when some people think about researchers as like white lab coats or like, looking at someone through a two-way mirror.
Looking as it is in movies. It's a lot of, and it depends right on the kind of research you do. So psychology, most people when they think of psychology, they think more of like therapy and clinical psychology where you're working with populations of people who have challenges of various kinds. I'm a social psychologist. So what we study is what everyone does all the time. And we study sort of typical behavior. And what we're particularly interested in is how the situation you find, the reason it's called social, right? It's how do the other people in the situation with you and how does the circumstances you find yourself in affect your behavior, affect how you think, affect how you feel. So we're studying what everybody does all the time. But in order to make it science, you have to try to apply a little bit of rigor to it, right? So you try to like control as many things as you can. So we bring people into the lab. I mean, I talked at a little bit about this, but I would bring people into the lab, and these would be college students typically, and I would just do terrible things to them because I was interested in studying how people deal with failure and negative feedback.
Can you share what's some?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So because again, like adversity was the thing I was trying to engineer, right, in my experiments. So we'd bring people in. I remember I did a study at Columbia. We had undergraduates come in. They're high achievers. They're very competitive. Yeah. I gave them a test. They were problems from like a typical like GRE, LSAT kind of analytical reasoning.
And by the way, they're probably very also very confident.
Oh, very confident.
Yes,
they have a high opinion of themselves,
mess with these people.
And it really matters to them. And so we give them a set of 10 problems. And what we did was we had a sort of a fixed mindset group and a growth mindset group. So we give you these 10 problems. In the fixed mindset group, we say, you're going to do these 10 problems. They measure an aspect of your intelligence. And when you're done, we're going to compare how well you did to other Columbia undergraduates. So clearly the point, right, is I'm going to prove myself.
That's right, yeah.
The other group, we said we're going to give you these 10 problems. They measure an aspect of your intelligence that research shows can be developed with practice. So this is an opportunity for you to develop this aspect of your intelligence, right? Awesome. So that's the growth mindset condition. Yeah. Same problems, right?
Yeah.
And then we told everyone they scored in the 23rd percentile.
No matter how they did.
No matter how they actually did. This was devastating to everyone, by the way.
Just for our listeners at home, if they're not statisticians, what does performing in the 20th?
Oh, I mean, it means that you only got 1 out of, well, it means compared to other people, right? So in other words, roughly 4 out of 5 Columbia students are better at this than you are, which is not a number anyone wants to hear. Yeah. And they were very upset. And all of them, actually, even the ones in the, and this is a common misconception about growth mindset, that when you're in a growth mindset, like you're happy to fail. Nobody's happy to fail. Right. You just deal with it differently and much more productively. But so everyone's upset. And then we gave them a second set. We measured how upset they were. And then we gave them a second set of 10 problems. But what was interesting was what we found when the kids thought that the point was to prove themselves, the more negative emotion they felt after that first failure, the worse they did on the second set of problems. But with growth mindset framing, it was the opposite.
So they still had the negative reaction.
They had the negative reaction, but the worse they felt, the better they did.
That's great.
Right? So they used it as fuel.
Yeah.
Rather than as sort of saying, oh, I'm hopeless at this. Yeah. I'm not even going to try. Yeah. Right? So it's, again, like we can't protect people from having failure experiences. We can't protect them from feeling bad when things aren't easy, when they don't go well. By the way, we don't need to protect people from that. What you just need is to help them have the mindset that's going to allow them to use that as like energizing fuel to actually get better.
That's great. Yeah. So now let's take that into...
Well, by the way, just really quickly, at the end of the experiment, I did tell everyone that was false feedback. Yes. They did not, in fact, score in the 20. They were so happy.
All of them, no matter what? Was anyone
all
mad?
Of them. We told them the truth. Like, by the way, that wasn't true. We just said that to you so that we could see sort of how you would respond. Yeah. They were so relieved that they didn't actually score in the 23rd percentile that they weren't even mad at me, which was amazing. I felt like a few of them are going to be annoyed, but everyone was just so relieved. They were like, this was great.
I knew I was a genius. I knew it. Thank you. Yeah. Well, and speaking of increasing in resiliency, you have written how many books?
Well, 5. 5, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a lot. I've got a book coming out, and I've been working on it for years.
Congratulations.
Well, I only mentioned it to say I've been in the grind.
Oh yeah.
For a long time. So I'm curious.
Yes.
Well, one is like of your 5, the newest one was on asking for help.
Right, reinforcements. Yep.
I was going to ask which one was your favorite, but I would imagine usually.
Oh no, they're not like children. I can say which one I like best.
Okay, good.
They're all different. I mean, I also can say which one that was hardest to write.
Yeah.
The ones that are so I have a couple of books. That are, there's one that I wrote called No One Understands You and What to Do About It.
Yeah. Great titles, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That one I really enjoyed because it is about something that is actually so pervasive a problem. We all, humans, are wired. There's a particular kind of bias that psychologists call the illusion of transparency. We all believe that our thoughts and our feelings and our intentions are obvious to other people.
Because they're obvious
because
to us.
we know them, right?
Yeah.
Nothing could be further from the truth. And very often there is a huge gap between how we think we're coming across in a situation and how we're actually coming across.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more ambiguity than people realize in the things we do and say. And so people then interpret what we do and say. If you're a little quiet in a conversation with me, I might think, well, maybe he's preoccupied, or I might think maybe he doesn't like me very much, or maybe he doesn't find this very interesting. All of those explanations are available to me, right? I'm going to pick one.
Yeah.
It might be wrong. So that book is about helping people to understand if you feel like you've been misunderstood, if you feel like people don't get you, we're all in the same club on this one, but there are things you can do to send clearer signals. Yeah. Things that are less likely to be misconstrued, things people are more likely to pick up on so that your intention matches the impact that you actually have. So that was a fun book to write because I got to talk about so many different pieces of research on different topics of human behavior. I will say the hardest books for me were the ones that were kind of single topic. I find that I think, reinforcements, I love the book and I think it's really useful. And especially throughout the pandemic, I got a lot of feedback. People needed to ask for help.
Yes.
And they needed help figuring out how to do that well. Yeah. So I was really glad that I wrote it. But by the end of it, I thought I don't want to talk about help anymore for ever.
Ever.
I do enjoy talking about it now. But at the time I was like, can I please think about something else?
You're kind of over it.
So that's one of the hardest things about writing a book is sometimes you get real tired of the topic after a while. You're like, I've lost some enthusiasm on this year-long journey or multi-year journey.
Well, writing's like a sport. I mean, it takes like a mental focus.
It really does.
To write when you don't want to write.
It really, really does. So the more you write about something where you can kind of touch on a variety of things, I think the easier it is to keep yourself entertained.
Has that been one of your hacks? Like to make sure that you're getting...
Now, after I wrote the last one, I was like, I think I will only do multi-topic books from now on, or where I get to kind of talk about a lot of different things. Because chapters 12, 13, and 14 can feel rough. They really can.
Like, can we just make this a shorter book?
Yeah, it's like, does it really have to be that long? People like shorter books now,
Come on,
they?
Very vogue right now.
There's a lot of that.
The toilet is going to be great. Okay, last few questions. One is, what are you curious about these days?
Oh, wow. What am I curious about? So I think one of the things I am spending the most amount of time and kind of constantly looking for new research to be helpful about is really kind of two things. The uncertainty piece, right? So what other things can we give people as tools for themselves and others to help them manage? Because the level of uncertainty I feel like we all have now isn't going anywhere.
No, in fact, it's going to get worse.
It's going to keep, we keep saying, well, there's going to be a new normal. I'm not so sure. I think the new human superpower has to be developing that tolerance for change we are creatures of habit who now are constantly having to rewrite our habits.
Yes.
So I think the more we can kind of focus on what really helps people, some people are better at this than others. Why? Like I've said, it's not DNA, right? There's some things they're doing. There's ways they're thinking. There's strategies they're using. They're helping them. I think that's really interesting. And then the other thing, and a lot of my colleagues are focused on this as well, is how do we get people to bridge their divides? It's such a polarized time. It's been that for a while. When people, a friend of mine, Matt Lieberman, he's a cognitive neuroscientist at UCLA, just published a study where, he brought on Zoom calls, he brought people who were on opposite ends of the ideological spectrum, politically together. And it's like, everybody thinks going into that conversation, it's a lot like asking for help. Everybody thinks it's going to be horrible. And the people who were participating in it were definitely like, you better pay me a lot of money to do this because it's going to be really unpleasant.
It's an expensive study.
And it turns out that what they, found again and again and again was that these people were able to find tons of common ground, that they weren't nearly as different as they thought, and that it changed how they viewed their ideological differences. They still had them, but they didn't think about them the same way. And that's one of the problems. We don't have enough places where we can bring people together and have them see they're not so different because it's become so easy, thanks to like the internet in many ways, to stay in your own little bubble and then to sort of demonize people who feel differently and to not empathize with how they got there, even with ideas that you may find unpalatable to yourself. It's like there's always a story for how someone got there. And a lot of times it is from having had to have a lot of uncertainty and people kind of looking for ways to make themselves feel better. So I think those are some of the most significant challenges for people like me, for psychologists, is to find tools that people can use to make these things easier.
Yeah. Well, thank you for what you do. As a last question, at the Global Leadership Network, we care a lot about legacy. We care a lot about giving people the tools that will impact long after we're gone. When you think about your legacy and what you want to be remembered for, what comes up?
I'll say the sort of funny version of this. When I grew up, I want to be Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah,
I really, I have always, and it's interesting, it's part of why I left academia. I love the world of research, but I was so frustrated that the people who frankly pay for this, right? The people whose taxpayer dollars go toward funding research often don't get to benefit from it because what we do as academics is, we write it up in a journal article that like 5 other people read because it's unreadable, right? It's all in scientific jargon. Yeah. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if just in plain English, we could talk to people about what they could do differently based on all of the science. And so that really was the beginning of my evolution in this phase of my career, was really finding that I was probably, admittedly, a very average academic, but what I was really good at was talking in plain English about what science says.
Translating.
So, and that was my calling, right? Yeah. That was the thing that gave me the sense of greatest fulfillment and where I felt like I could have the greatest impact. So for me, that's sort of the future is finding more and more ways. And this has been a fantastic experience, and what an incredible privilege to get to talk to everybody that GLN touches. But that's the journey to kind of be the Neil deGrasse Tyson of psychological science.
Psychological science.
Yeah.
I love that, and you're on your way. Thank you for your books. Thank you for making it easy to understand. People like me. Thank you for your
genuine pleasure.
We love it. Your talk was wonderful.
Thank
I'm
you.
excited for the rest of the world to see it as well. And thanks for being a part of our community.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Jason and Heidi had such a great conversation. It was fun for me to hear them share their experiences writing books, which of course I have none. Her book, No One Understands You and Here's Why, sounds so intriguing to me. There certainly are times that I think I'm being crystal clear in my communication, and clearly it's a miss. So I have some work to do on that. I think the work of social psychologists like Heidi, who study typical human behavior and find tools for us to relate better to each other, are so important to our leadership development. That's why the Global Leadership Network team researches hundreds of thought leaders to invite to our events. So don't miss the Summit Special Edition on Thursday, February 16th, 2023 to experience them for yourself. Register at globalleadership.org by January 31st to save $20. And remember to check out our show notes to learn more about this episode. Thanks for listening, and until next time, lead right where you are and keep getting better.